What if I told you that the moment you finally come home to yourself doesn't feel like fireworks? It feels like grief. It feels like peace. It feels like remembering a song you didn't realize you'd forgotten. It feels like sitting in a quiet room and not needing to leave. But here's the disturbing truth. Most people will never meet themselves because the world trained them to run into jobs, into roles, into relationships where their worth was currency, into a life that felt more like acting than existing. But when you finally stop running, when the noise fades, and you meet the person beneath the performance, you don't just heal, you resurrect. There's a moment in history, quiet, almost forgotten, when this disconnect began. In 1833, during the early Industrial Revolution in Manchester, a strange law was passed. Children under 9 could no longer work in factories. Sounds humane, right? But what it really did was shift the strategy. It didn't end the exploitation. It just moved it. Children were now forced into institutions where silence, obedience, and sitting still for hours became virtue. Their nervous systems, once wild, imaginative, curious, were tamed like animals. That was the beginning of the disconnect, not just from the body, but from the self, from emotions, from creativity, from inner knowing. And the system never stopped. It evolved into boardrooms, into marriages, into entire religions, until you became fluent in every language except your own. Psychologists call it self-abandonment. But for many of us, it wasn't a decision. It was survival. Dr. Donald Winnicott, the British psychoanalyst, once said, "It is a joy to be hidden, but a disaster not to be found." When you were young, maybe you learned it was safer to be small, to nod even when you disagreed, to laugh even when your chest was tight with sadness, to be liked instead of being real. The brain adapts to that, literally. Neuroscience shows that children who grow up suppressing emotion show reduced activation in the insula, the part of the brain that registers internal bodily states. Translation, you learn to not feel yourself. So when people say, just listen to your gut, your body goes, what gut? I haven't felt safe there in years. There's a word in Old Greek, nostos. It means homecoming. But it's not about geography. It's about identity. The poet Homer used it to describe Odysseus' return after the Trojan War, not just to Ithaca, but to himself, after trauma, after deception, after forgetting who he was. Modern psychology barely touches on the spiritual homecoming, but ancient cultures knew it intimately. In Zulu tradition, there's a phrase, "Ukubisa." It means to bring the spirit back. They believed the soul could scatter during pain, that when someone experienced trauma or deep grief, pieces of their self would go missing, not metaphorically, energetically. And healing meant not just therapy, but calling those parts home. Dr. Stephen Porges developed the Polyvagal Theory, a groundbreaking map of the nervous system. What he found shook traditional psychiatry. Safety isn't just mental, it's physical. When you feel safe, your ventral vagal system activates, and suddenly you can breathe again. Here's what that means. Coming home to yourself isn't about thinking differently. It's about feeling differently. Feeling your feet in the earth. Feeling the breath you usually hold. Feeling the difference between I'm okay and I'm pretending to be okay. And here's the wild part. MRI studies show that when people engage in self-compassion, the brain's pain circuits deactivate. Literally, kindness to yourself heals physical suffering. You aren't lazy. You're disconnected. You're not broken. You're unmet. A woman in her 50s broke down crying because she heard birds singing for first time in 30 years, because her trauma had numbed her senses. A war veteran realized he wasn't angry. He was terrified, but had no emotional vocabulary to say it. A therapist who taught trauma recovery for years admitted she'd never once felt her own body in silence until her father died. These weren't magical transformations. They were slow, messy, honest. They didn't feel like becoming someone new. They felt like remembering someone ancient. Your truest self isn't something to be created. It's something to recover. There's a reason most people avoid this journey. It starts with loss. Loss of false identities. Loss of admiration from people who liked your mask. Loss of the adrenaline rush from constantly proving yourself. But when that dies, something else is born. Stillness without anxiety. Joy without performance. Decisions without overthinking. Love without fear. Coming home to yourself feels like sitting in a quiet room and hearing your soul say, "There you are. I missed you." You don't need a retreat. You don't need a therapist with 3 PhDs. You don't even need all the answers. You need a practice. One tiny, daily ritual that says to your nervous system, "It's safe now. You can come out." Try this. Each morning, put your hand on your heart. Ask, what part of me is asking to be seen today? Each evening, write down one thing you felt but didn't express. That's the beginning of reparenting your truth. When you're overwhelmed, pause. Name the emotion. Locate it in the body. That act alone rewires the brain's fear response. This isn't self-care. This is self-return. So, what does it feel like to finally come home to yourself? It feels like not needing permission to exist. It feels like crying, not because you're broken, but because you're whole enough to feel again. It feels like walking into your own skin and finally recognizing the furniture. It's quiet. It's sacred. It's a reunion. And no one else needs to understand it. Because this home, this one is for you. If this reached you, pause. Share it with someone who's still searching for the door. And if you've already come home, welcome back. Subscribe for more truth-telling, soul-stirring storytelling.